Okay, we are this time talking about Yukon, Pennsylvania. Uh, why Yukon? I mean, when you say Yukon, you think of someplace up around Alaska. It's a good question. Why did they call that place Yukon? And I'm not going to answer that question because I don't know. Maybe somebody who's watching this will be able to tell us why that wonderful place out there is called Yukon. What we're doing here is doing a survey of local history in the area around Westmoreland County. What we're not doing is we're not doing in-depth history here because that takes a lot of time and a lot of work, and you have to focus on a certain area and spend a lot of time working on that. What we're doing is just looking over a large area. And after you get a look at a large area, you do, after a while, get a sense of what might be worth going back to and doing an in-depth historical research project on that. But at this point, we're just looking around and seeing what's out there. Yukon is interesting for a number of reasons, not because of its age. I mean, it's not one of the older mines around. A lot of the mines around this area have been around since the 1800s, and Yukon is not one of them. Yukon only showed up about 1908. Before that, when you look at the mapping from the 1800s, Yukon just wasn't there. It was a place between Bell's Mills and Walsh Mills, which are other more historical sites in the area. Yukon lasted, however, a lot longer than most of the other mines. It was one of the most long-lasting and one of the most productive of the mines around this area. And it lasted until the 1950s. The official shutdown date for it is 1954, but we're told that even in the later 1950s there was some small-scale mining going on there. And one of the facts to bring up is that very shortly after the mine was founded, it started up in 1908, and only 2 years after that, there was a big mine strike of miners in Westmoreland County. And the Westmoreland Coal Company that owned Yukon Mine, or the McGee Mine, I should mention, McGee Mine was the name of the mine, Yukon was the name of the town. And Westmoreland Coal Company was fiercely against unionization. And those nasty people came in and they threw out the miners right out of their houses. They were actually company houses. And if you had a family, a lot of kids, and your wife in your house, too bad, buddy, you get the heck out. You're striking. And this is one of those very unfortunate things that happened in the history of mining in this area. There was at Yukon, one of the tent cities set up. The unions, from union dues that they had accumulated money from, they paid to set up tent cities where the miners who had been thrown out of their homes could, have at least tents to live in. And the results of these strikes were usually not good. But anyhow, a lot of people survived and have stories to tell about that. And often some very bad feelings about the mines and the mine owners. One thing we might not forget is that there are a lot of very interesting buildings left at Yukon. And at this point, I want to give a nice big shout out to Coke Oven Mike. Mike Mance did a lot of really good photographs of the mine buildings at Yukon. And I want Mike to know that we really appreciate these pictures, which you will see some of, a lot of actually. Having got a good look at the buildings at McGee Mine, the Yukon mine, called McGee after James McGee, who was supposedly one of the members of the board of directors of the mine, I can't help getting the idea that this might be a good district to nominate to the National Register of Historic Sites. Not as a site, but as a district. And I'm not necessarily talking about the houses, the company houses. That may or may not be an issue. And this is really not for me to decide. This is for the people at Yukon to think about, not my issue. But the structures that are left there are very significant for a couple of reasons. First of all, they are significant because of their connection with a very important part of the history of the region, which is the production of coal. You can't look at this region's history without understanding how much of it has to do with the coal mining industry. Another very important thing is the very buildings you have at Yukon. These are unlike any buildings, any mine buildings in the area, in the whole district. In the early 90s, the Habs-Hare Group, which is part of the United States Park Service, did a survey of this area. And they were looking for, trying to document what was left of the, the industry in the area, the Rust Belt area. It was called the, Heritage Project. And one of the comments they made in the document that they published in 1994 was that the buildings of the McGee mine at Yukon are unlike any other of the region because of the fine craftsmanship, the stone, ashlar stone cutting. And ashlar stone is not a type of stone, it's a type of cutting stone. And we want to look at some of that. We're going to see some of the buildings and what happened there. And we're going to shut down this part of the little video here, and we're going to shift to some of the pictures. So hang on. Now we get to look at some pictures. We're looking at an old map. This map comes from 1867. And what you see here is a relationship to where Yukon will be, it's not there yet, to Greensburg, just to show you Greensburg up here. Down here, there is no Yukon yet. There's Walsh Mill over here, and the place over here where the covered bridge is, Bell's Mills. And Yukon won't be there for probably around 40 more years. This is a contemporary map. Neustadt over here, Yukon over here, the covered bridge over here, Walsh Mills over here. I just like to point out context, showing where things are. This is an aerial view taken from an airplane in 1939. Yukon, the town is over here, and I'm going to zoom in so I can show you something about the mine itself. This is Big Sewickley Creek and the railroad going by, which isn't there anymore. The creek is. This is the mine down here. This was the boiler house and dynamo room. And over here was the hoist house, which we're going to look at. The hoist house had cables going up to the mine entrance, which was up here. By the way, it was a
slope entrance mine. It wasn't a drift mine, it wasn't a shaft mine, it was a slope mine. This picture comes from a Park Service publication, a book printed in 1994. This was the boiler house, and this was the hoist house. That's the inside of the hoist house right there. That's the book that those pictures were from. And in that book, on page 168, there's a quote I want to read to you. It's very short. "The impressive ashlar stone structures that form the colliery at Yukon are unlike any other mine buildings in the region." End of quote. And I just want to point out that that is done by experts, people who are expert in documenting historic structures. This is the hoist house over here with the stream going by. We're going to take a look at what would have been in that building. This is a drawing of a hoist that was used for mines. Not the one at Yukon, but it's a typical hoist. Mapping from 1916. This is the hoist right here, the hoist house. There would have been cables and tracks going up to the mine entrance, which would have been up here. That's one of Coke Oven Mike's photos of the hoist house, which is now empty. These structures here were for the railroad when it went through. In this shot, which is not a very good photo, but it's what we have, the hoist house would have been down here. And this photo was taken from up on top of the mine entrance. You can see the machine shop, the boiler house down here, the office. This was the tramway where cars would have come out of the mine and gone down, and empties would have been brought back up to be filled up. This is fairly contemporary shot. This is the hoist house here. There was a tramway going up this way to the mine. The mine was here. This was the machine shop, the office, the boiler house, and the dynamo house where electricity was made. They need a lot of electricity, not just in the mine itself, but over here in the hoist house. Hoists for mines used a lot of electricity. That was the entrance for the mine. And I have a feeling that a lot of filling in has been done. They were one time higher than this. A lot of things have happened here. And that tells us we're coming to an end of another slick and shiny tongue-in-cheek production. We have once more stumbled our way through a maze of digital nonsense to bring you another look at some of the history of the region. And we'll have another one on Yukon, at least one, probably a couple more. And I want to say so long until we meet again. Bye now.